Writing a good essay can be very formulaic. There's a list of steps to take, there's a formula for it. If you follow the list of steps in the formula, you can write a very, very serviceable essay. It might not be the most amazing essay of literary merit that's been written in the history of man. It might not win a Pulitzer Prize, but it'll be pretty solid for the SAT. And if you take that foundation and you embellish it and you add on to it, that's where the truly great essays come from. So I'm going to start with the fundamentals and the foundation. The essay really comes at its heart from your thesis, from your claim or your perspective. You need to make a solid thesis that answers the question, or your essay is not going to score nearly as high as you want it to. Other than the thesis, your overall writing style, variety of sentence use, sentence structure, vocabulary, turn of phrase, those are all really, really, really important. If you're an interesting writer and you have clever language, then you will do quite well on the essay. But that is not something that you can develop in a very short period of time, or in a month, or in 3 months, or in 6 months. That type of writing style is the sum total of your schooling from kindergarten all the way up into high school, how well the last 10 or 11 years of schooling have prepared you for this time. But you can build a foundation to add that writing style onto. You can build a foundation with the thesis. That's like the cornerstone. That's the most important part of your essay. A thesis needs to answer the question. It needs to make a claim or take a position. It needs to support that claim or position. And then, if possible, lead to your examples, lead to the rest of your essay. Give the reader an idea what you'll be talking about. A basic thesis that's acceptable will take a position and answer the question. That's a basic thesis. It's not a good thesis. A good thesis takes a position and answers the question and gives a reason or analysis or support for the position that you take. An excellent thesis does all of that and leads on into the rest of the essay. It's really hard to write an excellent thesis, but it's surprisingly easy to write a good thesis if you follow the formula. Answer the question. Choose a position. Give a reason for that position. You have a good thesis. That's pretty simple. You go from the thesis into your examples. A formulaic way of writing an essay is to have the introduction paragraph end with your thesis. 2 or 3 body paragraphs, preferably 3, each with a solid example or logic or analysis or supporting piece of evidence that supports your thesis. You should write down the basics of your thesis, your position, and what your 3 pieces of evidence or examples are before you start writing your essay. It's called an outline. You only have 25 minutes for the SAT or 30 minutes for the ACT, so only spend 2 or 3 minutes writing the outline. The rest should be spent in the essay. These are the most important 2 or 3 minutes you spend. If you have an idea of where you're going with it, you won't get lost, you won't get distracted, you won't get stuck, you'll be flowing, you'll know what you're writing about ahead of time, you will wander off topic, it'll make a much better essay. Thesis is the most important. Examples and evidence are the second most important. Everything else follows from there. So then you've got the transitions, the topic sentences, the literary devices, all the usual things that you put in an essay definitely go into these kind of SAT and ACT essays. The flow is really important too. It needs to have a logical flow. It starts and it flows and it makes sense. The literary devices is where you can get really interesting and creative with your essay. You can take a literary device, a simile, a metaphor, a personification, fit it into your essay, and run with it. A formulaic way of doing it is to just have a checklist. Do I have a literary device in the essay? Check. Put it in the introduction. It's an easy way to knock it off and get it out of the way. Then move on to your thesis. Then move on to your examples. And then move on to a conclusion. The conclusion doesn't need to be really complicated. You're probably going to run a little low on time. Most people do. And the readers don't care. It's not a problem for them. So go ahead and just be perfectly fine with a 2-sentence or a 3-sentence conclusion. That's not an issue at all. If you're writing an essay for an English class, that wouldn't cut it. But for the SAT, that's perfectly fine. If you have a quote in mind or a definition, those are good things to put in the introduction to get the ball rolling, to kick off your essay, to make it interesting. Let's say you have a quote from Thomas Jefferson you want to put in, and you're going to talk about Thomas Jefferson later on in the essay. Go ahead and drop that into the introduction. You can even add a quote from a family member. My grandmother always told me when I was young, and then you put a quote from your grandmother in the introduction. That's perfectly fine. That will make a very good essay. This brings me to the different types of essays to write. The 2 basic types are the analytical essay and the personal reflective essay. If you're writing an analytical essay, that's just the standard, here's an essay, here's my thesis, here's my argument, and you run with it, just like what I was talking about. The personal reflective essay is a little bit different because you're talking about an issue in your childhood, something your father did, maybe you're talking about your grandparents or your brother or your friends or school. That's perfectly fine too. You can write a personal reflective essay and it can be an excellent, excellent essay. For the SAT, you can also do comedic essays or sarcastic essays, whatever you want to run with as long as it answers the question. That's perfectly fine. But don't do an essay outside of your comfort zone. Don't write a strange essay if you're not comfortable writing a strange essay, like one of the comedic types. But if you naturally write that way, great, go for it. For the ACT, don't do that. Do the boring essays. The ACT wants it to be boring. They want you to follow the formula, so follow the formula. Now, what type of examples can you use, you might wonder? Well, you can use a literary character. You can use a movie character. You can use the author themselves. You could use a politician, a historical figure, a mythological figure. The examples you could use could range all the way from Jesus and Buddha to Malcolm X to Winnie the Pooh. I'm just picking names out of a hat here. All of those could be fine examples for the SAT or the ACT. But when you pick multiple examples, make sure there's some correlation. If you're writing an essay about inspiring figures, and you pick up Jesus, Buddha, Muhammad, and those are your inspiring figures, great. They make a lot of sense working together. Those are great examples. If you go with Jesus, Muhammad, Winnie the Pooh, I don't see the connection. Maybe Winnie the Pooh is great by himself, but not with the other two. So you need to link your examples together, not just pick them randomly. Sports stars could be an example if you're a sports fan. People you know, your father, your mother, those are good examples. Other good examples could be you from your childhood for the personal reflective essay, you from current day, those are all fine too. But the key is having it flow and progress and be understandable. The SAT will ask you a question, usually about some sort of societal issue. Who is a hero? What is change like? Is the world better now than it was 50 years ago? So you answer and you focus on the question, you build your analysis and your evidence for it. The ACT asks a more personal question. Should high schools be allowed to have co-ed sports teams? Yes or no? Should you have football with girls and guys playing football at the same time? That might be the question of the ACT. They'll try to focus it a little bit more on your personal situation, well, what high schoolers today are going through. So you change your essay accordingly to match the topic.